when you drive the Motoramic Chevrolet, the car with young ideas.
I'm gonna give you 40 days to get you back home. I done called up a gypsy woman on the telephone. Gonna send me on a worldwide hoodoo. It'll be the very thing in a suit. I'm gonna see she'll be back home in 40 days. In 40 days. 40 days. Woo! 40 days. 40 days. Gonna see she'll be back home in 40 days. 40 days. Gonna send me on a worldwide hoodoo. It'll be the very thing.
Good old rock and roll. When you're a honky-tonk man like me, listening to the old songs sure brings back a lot of good old memories. This may not look like it, but it's a time machine. Simple instructions. Get in, turn on the key, hit the road. In the 50s, we came of age. So did the auto industry. We were caught up in the explosion of the times. The future was now, and everything seemed possible. That's a 1957 Chevrolet, one of the most recognizable and collected cars of its era. The 55s and 56s aren't far behind. There are more restored 55, 6, and 7 Chevys on the road today than ever before. These cars were more than an example of automobile styling. They serve as a link to a bygone era. We sure like to remember those good old days. They had a style all their own.
From the brilliant new General Motors line for 1955. Chevrolet Bel Air Sport Coupe.
What we're talking about in part is nostalgia for the mass culture of the 50s. I mean, the 55, 6, 7 Chevys, like other mass-produced objects, were part of that mass culture. These sorts of images have gotten embedded in people's consciousness very early in their lives, and part of their nostalgia for their own childhood and teenage years now is a nostalgia for those things which are very significant parts of their environment. It's also true that the artifacts of the 50s, including the cars, are certainly very colorful. There was a kind of artistic license with the sort of splaying on of chrome and paint in the 50s that still is striking to behold.
The 30s demanded toughness and the 40s sacrifice. As the world went to war, the auto industry geared up for a wartime production.
General Motors plants were by now 100% on war work. The last car for civilians came off early in 1942. The same good workmanship appears now on another page of the family album, which carries the portrait of the Mosquito bomber. Its fuselage took shape on the very spot in the General Motors plant where the craftsmen of another day had built the early wooden bodies for McLaughlins and Chevrolets.
There's a great enthusiasm developing through the war, a lot of patriotism and rah, rah, rah. And we came out of the war basically on top of the world. We had a lot of money pent up there, built up. And for all through the 30s, there was no money to buy goods. And through the early 40s, because of the war, there was plenty of money, but there were no goods to buy. So it was this explosion of maybe 15 years of pent-up money and emotion and enthusiasm. The 55 Chevrolet is really the milestone Chevrolet, a totally different concept and a different package from 54 and everything else that went before it. And that was really the threshold of the interest in these mid-50s Chevys.
New Bel Air Chevrolet. Step right in.
Beautiful.
See your Chevrolet dealer and discover how great low-cost motoring can be when you drive the Motoramic Chevrolet, the car with young ideas.
See, I started in the Chevrolet studio, I think it was 1951, and I became chief designer about the time that Ed Cole came aboard from Cadillac. In 53, Chevrolet was going downhill. 54 was even worse. Ford had the V8 and pretty sharp-looking car and was appealing to the young buyer. Well, that's what Chevrolet should have been doing, and that's what Ed Cole was determined to do, was to get the young buyer aboard.
And take your hat off in this classroom.
You ever try to fight 35 guys at one time, Teach?
Youth occupied a unique place in the 50s, and teens were perceived as different. To be young was special. The teenager was a new force to be reckoned with.
Take your hat off, boy, before I knock it off.
Companies were after the emerging youth culture, and a high ideal was put on the value of being young.
Now, nail down the roof, gang, because here's a new act that could blow it right up.
Grab your partner, grab your gal, and rock.
It wasn't easy for kids to understand their parents, who still remembered the importance of being thrifty during the Depression. But then as now, teens were the opinion leaders, and adults were quick to copy their taste. By the early 50s, research into the untapped teen market had begun.
Doesn't the noise sort of wear you down a bit, get on your nerves?
No, not at all. I enjoy having them here, and they're a great bunch of kids. In fact, they provide half our business.
Really?
Yes, they do.
Good.
Now, would you excuse me, please?
Yes, sir.
Teenagers emerged as big-time spenders. They knew what they wanted and bought it, just like that. With the help of Mom and Dad, they spent more than $10 billion in 1957 alone.
I'll turn the car around so we can make a quick getaway.
In a child-centered society, kids could easily nag their parents to buy most anything.
It has the super-powered Grid Ram V8 engine at 130 horsepower that utilizes the principle of the hemispherical combustion chamber with lateral intake and exhaust valves, which contribute to its marvelously complete and efficient utilization of fuel.
Chevrolet knew the value of teens as the family persuader.
But I'm not gonna give in easy. J.P. Mudrock has a mind of his own. So I consented to look at new cars.
In 1955, hoping to attract this new youth market, Chevrolet introduced an all-new hot V8. Stock out of the box, it was fast. And everyone knew that if speed was what you wanted, you were better off behind the wheel of a Chevy.
It was a more youthful image, indicative of the explosion of the times. It was a fine blend of styling and engineering, and the fact that the car ran good and held up well made it sell over and over again as a used car. And by the time we get into the early 70s, this was the car representative of the 50s. The Ford didn't have the styling package, basically. It didn't have that snappy, youthful image.
Whirling up from deep imagination, sweeping aside the old, ushering in a new automotive era.
It was the times. You have to realize that we were trying to do the hottest Chevrolet we could at the time. Totally brand new. So the 55 really kicked Chevrolet off. And when we talk about the 3 years, the 55, 6, and 7, this started it. And then, of course, the 56 and 7 were probably the 2 most successful facelifts in automotive history.
You give up high performance for high capacity. You pass on your favorite foods to fit into your favorite.
Well, it was a Saturday night and at the old house home. We were born a jacket and having a ball.
Tens of thousands of people around the world restore and collect this classic symbol of the 50s American car. There's no single reason why they do it, but one thing they share is passion. And the car is the glue that binds them together.
There's so many reasons. I mean, I've heard so many excuses why I buy. I think that's the funniest thing is that we all have to give ourselves excuses why we're buying this car. And really the bottom line is we're in love.
We just meet a lot of neat folks who share a common interest in anything and really probably feel pretty much the same thing we do. It's just a lot of fun. I mean, it's kind of like a camaraderie, I guess you'd say. But I just like cars.
It's like a call. The people that appreciate these cars are here. They have the same interest. Everybody likes these 3 years that are here. I mean, that's our way of being.
You know, you're going down the highway and you get grown-ups and little kids, you know, giving you thumbs up and stuff, and it's hilarious, you know. Little kids that they don't even know what a 55, 6, or 7 is, and then they are giving you thumbs up. We got a lot of that coming from Vancouver Island. We went to that show up there, then driving across Canada. We got a tremendous amount of people just driving by and honking, big semis honk. You know, it's great.
Everyone feels an affection for those lost days of youth. It's the stuff nostalgia's made of. We long for that simpler time and forget the difficulties of being young.
So you get in Friday night, you phone your buddy up, yeah, I'm gonna leave in a little while and go. And then both of you would race to your cars and get in and be the first guy there, to be leaning against the side of the car and polishing the chrome or something when he pulled in, you know. It was that race, you beat the guy again, and your car was always the coolest.
Cruising was always a big thing for me back in the mid to late 50s. Oh, we used to cruise Grand River. Woodward Avenue was the biggest, I say, of all the cruise areas. It was just a good time on a Friday, Saturday night.
You go out and you cash in pop bottles and beer bottles and everything. You had enough gas money to go out and cruise all night and buy Pepsis and fries and have enough gas to cruise all night long.
In the 50s, you could pull into any restaurant, almost in any town in the United States. You would see nothing but 55 to 61, 62 Chevys and Fords and all Mercuries and long fender skirts and leg pipes, and get curb service, and they come out, and it's nostalgia, and everything was fluorescent neon and colored lights, and it seems like everybody, I guess, grew up and got married and went on to other things, but they wanted to go back to that. And it's just nostalgia drags them back.
Our next-door neighbor owned one. The kids I went to high school, half of them were driving them when we were old enough to drive cars. These cars were about 8 or 9 years old, and it's what you had for a second family car. So throughout my life, they've just always been around, and I've always enjoyed them.
Say, isn't that Jimmy Jones? They say he's the richest man in Texas.
Richest man in the world?
Look there, he's got a new Chevy.
A large portion of today's collectors were the kids of the 50s and early 60s. Too young to drive, but old enough to remember.
Oh, man, what's a powerful car?
Chevy Power. The power that broke a Pikes Peak stock car record that stood for 21 years.
Better looking, safer.
A car with long, low lines, with the extra power and performance that give you the better, safer driving control.
The kind of car everybody wants.
The kind of car you can see and drive at your Chevrolet dealers right now. Right?
Right. I wish.
Gee, I wish I was old enough to drive.
Now, here's a wonderful car.
It was said that cars were intended as fantasies, sold as fantasies, and bought as fantasies.
You know what? Yes, I like it.
I'm a girl who happens to think that a brand new car is better than mink.
Excited?
Delighted. So glad I got invited.
Since it's just a dream and involves no money, which one would you like me to buy you, honey?
I can remember myself going down to the showrooms and had no way of ever buying a car at that time. Had no money to buy a car. But I'd go down and look at the cars because they meant that much to me.
I think people just
fell in love with them. Those were the days when they changed car models, and most people couldn't wait till they went down to the dealers to see the new cars. Well, today, I don't think they do that much because the cars all look the same, and they don't know whether they're looking at an 88 or a 1990 or what it is. And the people were all hyped up over these, what they thought of as classy cars, and they turned out to be classy cars.
Affordable to the pocketbook, you could set the family in motion for about $2,300 bucks. That same car today, depending on its condition, could run you 20 grand and up. It may not have been the Cadillac you had on the showroom floor, but it drew a lot of looks from the neighbors when you pulled in the driveway.
And this period of time where the car was a romantic period for people, I think this is why the cars were designed that way, and then down through time, they've worn well. Let's face it, these cars are still good looking today as they were then. Why? Good design, good sections, nice side treatments, nice details. They're romantic. People love them. And I'm flattered.
Well, originally when they were first introduced in the fall of 1954, when the 55 models were introduced, they were an innovative automobile. They were totally redesigned. They were longer, they were lower, and the car manufacturers of those days were starting to put a little style into them and appeal to people's taste rather than a vehicle just being for basic transportation.
I beg your pardon. I represent a national opinion poll. We're making a survey.
Well, how do you do? I've been waiting for years for one of you folks to get around to me. Now, frankly, I think the...
Sorry, but this survey is on customer buying. We want to find out why the average American customer has changed so much in recent years.
Well, I didn't know we had.
Oh, yes, when it comes to major items anyway. Everybody knows that.
I didn't.
But you certainly don't buy the same way today as you did, well, as you did 8 years ago, do you?
Well, no. You're right about that.
Now, if you just tell me why you've changed, I'd be very glad to...
In the cookie-cutter suburbs, the expanding middle class spurred a consumer boom.
And new residential areas are springing up around them. $40 million worth of new housing in 1 year, in one township alone.
We were on the move and wanted to do it in style.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet through the USA. America's the greatest land of all. On a highway or a road along a levee. Performance is sweeter, nothing can beat her. Life is completer in a Chevy. So make a date today to see the USA. See it in your Chevrolet.
Cars were now a symbol of power and status. They made the suburban lifestyle possible, and the nation became dependent on the private auto. During the 50s, annual sales seldom fell below 7 million vehicles. And by 1958, over 67 million cars and trucks were on the road.
The power of success.
Chevrolet scales even greater heights when Chrome Dreams returns on TLC.
But what's this? Actually a 1956 Chevrolet, carefully camouflaged because the climactic performance test comes many weeks before announcement day. And the test itself, a certified high-speed run up rugged old Pikes Peak, America's most famous mountain, and a continuing challenge to automotive engineers.
Starting with 55, the small block engine, for instance, and that old engine has been with us forever and is still out there. If you look at the basic for the Oldmore Chevy engine that races in Indianapolis, that's still the base framework for that engine. And from a design standpoint, you know, those old cars were just bulletproof.
And it's astounding. 12.5 miles to the top of Pikes Peak in only 17 minutes, slashing the old record by more than 2 minutes.
All the stock modified classes were just dominated by Chevys in those days, and mainly because of the engine, but coupled with those year cars, and everything meshed together. They had an excellent car, whether it was drag racing, circle racing, Pikes Peak, slalom, just everything that was on the go.
These are performance tests in the public proving grounds where a spectator can see what a car can do and give him an idea of why the car that wins so consistently on the tracks is also the nation's performance and sales leader.
The Chevy 265 V8 and the 283 V8 had a well-deserved reputation for being quicker off the line.
They jumped into this Chevrolet and it would go like gangbusters right out of the showroom floor, that V8 engine and performance.
Yeah, 56, we had strong competition. And our competition was looking a little longer, a little heavier, a little wider.
Well, I never felt more like singing hooray. Just drove a new Ford, and I'm here to say it's all new. It's sure a new kind of Ford. Well, no car for the dough is a car so long. No car for the dough is so rugged and strong. And in Ford, you get a new kind of ride.
See and drive the car with the look, the feel, the power of success. The 56 Dodge, value leader of the forward look.
Competition got a little keener. Chrysler came out with the forward look. Big tail fins and two-tone treatments. Ford had a brand new car for 57. So that's what led us into the 57 facelift, which we called a major facelift. But this one wasn't as extensive. But you still got a pretty different looking car in the 56 from the 55.
We went to the wider front end, which Bob Cattery tells me I designed. That sort of slips on my mind. You know, you do so many cars, you forget who did what. But we did the wide front end to become competitive with other cars and to get more variation from the 55. 55 in the narrow front end, we had to do something else. And it was a facelift year. So we did that, and we got a longer looking car by extending the rear fenders and the side treatment.
Designers, like everyone else, were caught up in the optimism of the times, and it showed in their work.
Looks like it's still moving, even when it stops.
Some design.
That rear end looks just like a jet plane.
3, 2, 1, blast off! Look, it's ready. Fire 1, fire 2, 3, 4.
Functional or not, images of jets and rockets found their way into automotive design. At GM's Advanced Design Studio, a young Carl Renner was given the freedom to create the cars of the future.
Most of us were interested in aircraft. Everybody wanted to fly. My method was I'd do a person with goggles on and a scarf flying or a little helmet, and just a steering wheel in his hand. Then I'd draw the cockpit, or the type of windshield, or center line of the hood, and it would develop. And then put the wheels in last. Others used a different method, but the results always came out the same. You know, eventually got a car. When I went to General Motors after Disney, the man quoted me a price. At Disney, I was making $25 a week. Yeah, that's $100 a month. I went in, and the man said, he asked me what I was making at Disney. I told him. He looked up at me and said, gee, that's was pretty bummed those days, but I thought it was good for drawing. And he said, 200 a month. And I said, what, 200? He said, all right, I'll make it 250. I was flabbergasted for getting that kind of money for drawing. It was amazing. We worked round the clock on some jobs. We didn't. The money wasn't really not to most of us. Made no difference. We loved to do it. Our favorite saying was, imagine when we're getting paid for doing this, because we loved to work.
George. Firebird 2 to Control Tower. We are about to take off on the highway of tomorrow. Stand by.
Products were made for the generation, and the generation for the products. And the Motorama was the space-age showroom.
Go on, enjoy yourselves. Look around at the new dream cars built to test new ideas and your reactions to them.
General Motors was determined to keep and build on its edge.
Oldsmobile's elegant golden rocket.
Sports Outfit by Pat Primo of Los Angeles.
Pontiac's Club de Mer, open to the sky.
Costume by Emilio of Capri.
Chevrolet's Impala, graceful and swift.
Silk Casual by Digby Morton of London.
People not only dreamed of the future, they lived it.
This is the kitchen of tomorrow, a press-button dream coming true for Mrs. Housewife. All sorts of wonders are hers at the push of a button, from refrigerator doors to countertops built for big gals or little gals. Don't have to lean over here, you see.
When I first heard about this movie, about Chrome Dreams, I started thinking of the image that came to me was the back seat of my last Chevy, which was a 57 Chevy convertible, and seeing all the stuff we were going to the beach with, and the old portable radios the way they were, and the beach balls, and all the stuff that I probably still have in my collection somewhere, you know, bits and pieces of the Flotsam and the Jetsam. And the stuff that's really cool is still fun today.
It was space age, but it's not what we would consider our space age today. People really were looking towards the future, and the designs were freer. You saw a lot more outrageous designs, like cars having fins, and you got a lot of wild things happening. It wasn't like today, very minimal and very precise. It was very free.
The style, the colors, the turquoises and the pinks and the pink and black and the rockabilly and stuff. This is a Fulton traffic light finder. And you used to put this up in the corner of your windshield.